Boris Johnson, the political Houdini of our time, appears once again to be stirring in the cauldron of conservative politics, hubble bubble. And while officially preoccupied with book writing and kitchen renovation, he has simultaneously re-emerged on the world stage, rekindling ties with key international figures, including Donald Trump and Zelensky, while keeping a watchful eye on the fate of the Conservative Party. And despite his characteristic bluster, it's increasingly clear that Johnson believes he has unfinished business. Unfinished business? On the sofa? Ha ha! His allies, ever keen to stoke speculation, suggest that his return is not a question of if, but when. The presence at the Munich Security Conference, his sustained diplomatic engagement, his recent rehabilitation in the public eye all indicate a politician unwilling to remain on the sidelines indefinitely. And Johnson's most surprising recent move has been his apparent exoneration of Trump's Ukraine policy on the pages of the Daily Mail just the other day. And his unwavering commitment to striking this international image, despite Trump's vacillation about Ukraine. Johnson's framed the former and now the current president of the United States as part. He's presented the idea of a plan that is some grand strategic vision to squeeze Putin into a peace deal. This remarkable pivot, which sees Johnson presenting Trump as a potential savior of Ukraine rather than a liability, serves multiple purposes. It flatters Trump. It aligns Johnson with a likely future American foreign policy, and positions him as a leading global statesman with serious foreign policy credibility. So, particularly if Trump does what is speculated, that so an American president cannot serve two terms in office, and the rumours going around are that this is to be interpreted as two consecutive terms. Therefore, Donald Trump could serve a second consecutive term now. That would mean he served 3 terms, and this would be remarkable. And it's as if Johnson is positioning himself to make sure that he's there ready for when Trump begins his second term. In essence, Johnson is attempting to recast himself as a Churchillian figure, the statesman who saw the bigger picture when others faltered. And he's advocating for a pragmatic peace, one that secures Ukraine's sovereignty while pressing Russia into concessions. And his messaging is clear. If the West had followed his lead earlier, perhaps the war would have been closer to resolution. And while Johnson's allies insist he's simply observing the political landscape, the collapse of the Conservative Party under Kemi Badenoch has left a vacuum that few can fill. He might be able to. The party languishes in third place in the polls, trailing Reform UK and Labour, a state of affairs reminiscent of the Brexit Party's surge in 2019, and history suggests that when faced with existential threats from the right, the Tories turn to their most charismatic vote winner. And at the moment, that happens to be Boris Johnson. The case for his return, at least among his allies, is straightforward. And there's 5 points. He has star power. Johnson remains one of the few Conservative figures capable of galvanising disillusioned voters. He has brand recognition. His broad appeal, coupled with his skills, with his past achievement in galvanising the Red Wall constituencies, sets him apart from Badenoch, whose ideological rigidity and string of failures demonstrates her lack of mass appeal. Secondly, having secured an 80-seat majority in 2019, Johnson is a proven electoral asset rather than an electoral liability. And his ability to rally support in crisis moments makes him a more compelling figure than Badenoch, who lacks his populist touch. Thirdly, he has global clout, and this is what he's trying to do in the Daily Mail article. His connections with world leaders, particularly Trump and Zelensky, bolsters his statesman's credentials, making him a more credible leader on foreign policy than almost anyone certainly anyone in the Labour Party, and almost anyone in the Conservative Party. It puts him in a unique position. And while Badenoch is beloved by the right, Johnson has crossover appeal, drawing support from One Nation Conservatives and Brexiteers alike. And finally, Johnson thrives under scrutiny. Good or bad? Let's stay the sofa. Or Partygate! Unlike Badenoch, who struggles with the press, Johnson is adept at deflecting controversy and turning attacks into political theatre. Of course, the path to a Johnson restoration is fraught with obstacles. He's not even in Parliament. His political baggage from Partygate to the ignominious departure remains a significant liability. There's also the question of securing a parliamentary seat, which would require either a by-election or a leadership-backed selection process. And given Badenoch's control over candidate lists, she would need to sanction his return, an unlikely prospect unless she herself faces imminent removal, in which case there probably wouldn't be the time between suggestions, intimations of Badenoch's departure and the election of Boris and a campaign for him to become the leader of the Conservative Party. Moreover, the political terrain has shifted. The rise of Reform UK suggests that the electorate's appetite for disruption may now be channeled through Nigel Farage rather than through Johnson. If Johnson were to return, he would need to either strike a deal with Farage or to outflank him, a challenge given Reform's current momentum, a challenge given Reform's current crisis. A Johnson comeback would inevitably be framed as a Churchillian reform, a return, a man unjustly exiled by lesser politicians only to be recalled in Britain's hour of need. In his book Unleashed, is laced with this narrative, subtly reinforcing the idea that he was done in by the political establishment. Of course, he could have turned to Nadine Dorries to supply that narrative too. The plot! His return is not a certainty, but as history shows, Boris Johnson is never truly out of the game. With the Conservative Party teetering on the brink of oblivion and Badenoch failing to reverse its fortunes, his allies' predictions of a dramatic comeback may prove prescient. Whether his second act would be a masterstroke or another catastrophe is an open question, but for the Tories, desperate times call for desperate measures. In the end, Johnson may not need to seize the leadership, it may simply fall into his lap. And if history has taught us anything, it's that when the ball comes loose at the back of the scrum, Boris Johnson is always there to pick it up.